It is the summer of 1943. High above the rolling clouds of Europe, a brilliant blue sky stretches for miles, bisected only by the dark silhouettes of bombers flying in formation. The smell of oil and fuel fills the air inside the cramped cockpits, and the hum of engines is a constant backdrop. Below, the lush countryside of France and Germany seems peaceful, an illusion that belies the chaos of the war raging overhead. As the bombers make their way toward their targets, they are unaware of the deadly predator that waits in the wings. The P-51 Mustang, sleek and deadly, emerges from the distance. Its wings gleam in the sunlight, and its engines roar as it dives toward the unsuspecting formations of German bombers. The Luftwaffe, despite their dominance in the early years of the war, had dismissed the P-51 Mustang. They ridiculed the aircraft, confident in their superiority. But as the Mustang's machine guns begin to rattle, tearing through the bombers with ruthless efficiency, the arrogant laughter of the Nazi commanders dies in their throats. The P-51 Mustang had arrived, and it was about to change the course of the war. By the summer of 1943, World War II had reached a critical juncture. The Axis powers, led by Nazi Germany, had held the initiative for much of the conflict, but cracks were beginning to show. The Allies, bolstered by their increasing industrial output and the relentless resolve of their fighting forces, were starting to turn the tide. The Luftwaffe, once a dominant force in the skies over Europe, now found itself stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts and facing an increasingly capable and relentless Allied air force. The Luftwaffe's primary objective had been to establish air superiority, and particularly over the skies of occupied Europe and the Reich itself. This dominance was essential for securing German bomber missions, like the infamous raids on London during the Blitz, and for ensuring the success of their own military campaigns. But by 1943, their air superiority was beginning to erode, especially over the skies of Germany itself. The introduction of the long-range, heavily armed P-51 Mustang marked a turning point in the aerial conflict. The Mustang was developed by North American Aviation in 1940, initially as a response to the British need for a better escort fighter for their bombers. In just a few short years, the P-51 evolved into a world-class fighter, particularly after the installation of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in 1942. This new engine gave the Mustang an unmatched range and speed, making it the perfect counter to the German bombers that had once dominated the skies. The Allies had faced an ongoing issue with bomber protection during raids deep into enemy territory. British and American bombers, primarily the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator, needed fighter escorts to fend off the Luftwaffe's interceptors. However, these bombers had limited range, and by the time they reached German airspace, their escorts had to turn back, leaving them vulnerable to attack. The Luftwaffe had consistently used this weakness to devastating effect, downing large numbers of Allied bombers on their missions. By 1943, this deadly equation was beginning to change. The introduction of the P-51 Mustang as an escort fighter, capable of flying with the bombers for long distances into the heart of Germany, completely shifted the balance. The Mustang was faster, more maneuverable, and better armed than its contemporaries. It could chase down German bombers with ease, and its .450 caliber machine guns, along with the long-range fuel tanks, allowed it to tear through the Luftwaffe formations. In response, the Luftwaffe had underestimated the P-51's capabilities. German commanders, intoxicated by their earlier successes, ridiculed the Mustang as just another American aircraft. They believed their advanced aircraft, like the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf Fw-190, were far superior. In their arrogance, they underestimated how quickly the P-51 would become the bane of their bombers. The dismissive attitude toward the Mustang would prove to be their greatest tactical blunder. By mid-1943, the Allies had begun to refine their strategic bombing campaigns. The United States Army Air Forces, USAF, in coordination with the Royal Air Force, RAF, had committed to the strategic bombing of key German industrial and military targets, most notably the ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt and the oil refineries in Ploiești, Romania. These bombers, protected by the P-51s, would become a formidable force that the Luftwaffe could no longer counter effectively. The skies over Europe were changing. The Luftwaffe's once imposing presence began to diminish as the P-51 Mustang's deadly accuracy and range forced them into a defensive posture. The Mustang's machine guns, powerful and precise, would soon rip through the heart of the German bomber fleet, exposing the flaws in the Luftwaffe's earlier overconfidence. The human angle, the pilot's perspective. For the pilots of the P-51 Mustang, the war was as much about survival as it was about strategy. The cockpit of the Mustang, while advanced, was a small and confining space. Pilots, often young men barely out of their teens, flew for hours over enemy territory, knowing that each sortie could be their last. The physical toll of these missions was immense. The Mustang's engine roared relentlessly, and the G-forces in tight maneuvers pushed pilots to their limits. Yet for these men, the Mustang symbolized freedom. It was their chance to strike back at an enemy that had for years been terrorizing Allied civilians. And when they saw the bombers in their sights, the adrenaline was palpable. The roar of their machine guns tearing through the Luftwaffe bombers was a moment of retribution. The Mustang gave these pilots the ability to protect their comrades in the B-17s and B-24s, but more than that, it allowed them to carry out their own revenge against the enemy. But despite their skill, they faced tremendous risk. They had to contend not only with the deadly German fighters in the air, but also with the hostile terrain beneath them. The Luftwaffe's defenses, though beginning to weaken, were still formidable, and the skies above Germany were filled with anti-aircraft fire. Every mission was a gamble, and every pilot knew that their fate could change in an instant. The tactical angle, a changing battlefield. The tactical advantage provided by the P-51 Mustang was a game-changer for the Allies. Until its introduction, Allied bombers had been vulnerable to German interceptors on their long flights over enemy territory. The B-17s, for example, were well armed, but lacked the range to protect themselves effectively once they entered German airspace. The Luftwaffe had capitalized on this weakness, sending waves of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s to intercept the bombers during their raids. With the arrival of the P-51 Mustang, this tactical flaw was addressed. The Mustang's long range allowed it to accompany the bombers deep into German airspace and provide protection against these interceptors. The Mustangs would fly in tight formations with the bombers, weaving through the sky like a swarm of predatory birds, always vigilant. If the Luftwaffe launched an attack, the Mustangs were quick to pounce, often catching German fighters off guard and leaving them no escape. But the real tactical brilliance of the Mustang lay in its ability to hunt. Its speed and maneuverability meant that it was not just a defensive asset, but a hunter capable of seeking out and destroying enemy aircraft. The P-51 pilots could intercept German bombers in their formations, tearing them apart with ruthless efficiency. The Mustang's ability to turn the tables on the Luftwaffe was a strategic shift that tilted the air war in favor of the Allies. The technological angle. The P-51 Mustang's engineering marvel at. The heart of the Mustang's success was its remarkable design and engineering. The P-51 was not the first American fighter of the war, but it was undeniably the best. The most significant change to the original design was the installation of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, which turned the Mustang from a mediocre performer into a high-performance fighter. This engine, developed by the British, was the key to the Mustang's success. It provided the aircraft with exceptional speed, power, and range, making it ideal for long-range escort missions. The Mustang could fly up to 1,000 miles, allowing it to accompany bombers all the way into the heart of Germany, a feat that no other Allied fighter could achieve. Its speed and agility also made it an excellent dogfighter, capable of engaging in close-quarters combat with the Luftwaffe's best. The Mustang's weapons were just as impressive. It was armed with 650 caliber Browning machine guns, powerful enough to tear through the relatively thin skin of the German bombers. The combination of the Mustang's speed, firepower, and range made it the most effective long-range escort fighter of the war. Its sleek aerodynamic design allowed it to outmaneuver enemy fighters while also absorbing the punishment that came with long-distance combat. The leadership angle. Command decisions that shaped the air war. Leadership decisions that led to the development and deployment of the P-51 Mustang were pivotal in shaping the course of the air war over Europe. In particular, The collaboration between British and American forces played a crucial role in getting the Mustang into combat. British officials recognized the need for a long-range escort fighter early in the war and had experimented with various designs, but it was the Americans who took up the challenge. North American aviation's commitment to creating a fighter that could meet these specifications led to the development of the P-51, the U.S. Army Air Forces. USAF initially dismissed the idea of a long-range escort fighter, but soon realized that the success of their strategic bombing campaigns would depend on such an aircraft. As the Mustang's effectiveness became clear, Allied commanders recognized its potential and made it a key component of their strategy. The leadership in both the RAF and the USAAF understood the importance of air superiority and how the P-51 could tip the balance in favor of the Allies. These decisions, made in boardrooms and planning sessions, had a direct impact on the fate of the war in the skies above Europe. The enemy angle. Luftwaffe's underestimation of the Mustang from the perspective of the Luftwaffe. The P-51 Mustang was an unwelcome and underestimated opponent. German commanders, initially dismissive of the American fighter, believed that their own fighters, such as the Bf-109 and FW-190, would easily be able to fend off any challenges posed by the Mustang. Their overconfidence was rooted in their past successes and their belief in the superiority of their aircraft and tactics. The Luftwaffe had dominated the skies early in the war, and their pilots were among the best trained in the world. They were used to intimidating Allied bombers. But the presence of the P-51 changed this dynamic. Initially, the Luftwaffe tried to counter the Mustang with their own high-performance fighters, but the Mustang's speed, range, and firepower proved too much. German commanders could not keep up with the Mustang's relentless attacks, and as the war progressed, the Luftwaffe found itself in a defensive position, struggling to defend its bombers from the new threat. The turning point in the battle for the skies over Europe came on a fateful day in 1943, a moment when the Nazi arrogance toward the P-51 Mustang would meet its crushing blow. The mission was a key American raid on German industrial centers, the Schweinfurt ball-bearing factory, a crucial component in the Nazi war machine. The Allied forces, led by the United States Army Air Forces, USAAF, had launched a series of strategic bombing campaigns to cripple Germany's industrial capabilities. However, the U.S. bombers, including the B-17 Flying Fortress, had been vulnerable to Luftwaffe interceptors on their long journeys over enemy territory. In previous missions, the bombers, even when escorted by fighters, had suffered heavy losses. The Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt, Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s were more than capable of dismantling the Allied formations. But on this day, August 17, 1943, something would change. This was the day the P-51 Mustang entered the fray in full force. Armed with 650 caliber machine guns, a powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, and a range that could reach deep into German airspace, the P-51 was about to turn the tide of the air war. The mission was a turning point, not only because of the importance of the target, but because it marked the first time that the Mustang would escort bombers over the entire course of their raid, from England to the heart of Germany. As the bombers approached their target, the Luftwaffe scrambled to intercept them, sending waves of their best pilots to take down the American bombers. But as the Luftwaffe pilots dove into attack, they were met with something they had not expected: the P-51 Mustangs. They appeared out of the sky, diving down from above, their guns blazing. The German fighters were caught off guard, and for the first time they were the ones on the defensive. The American Mustangs, with their superior speed, maneuverability, and firepower, made short work of the enemy aircraft. The German bombers, once untouchable, were now vulnerable to the Mustang's relentless assault. The Luftwaffe's arrogance was shattered in an instant. The American fighters tore through the German bomber formations with brutal precision, their machine guns ripping through the delicate skin of the enemy aircraft. Explosions lit up the sky as bombers were struck down, and German pilots, once confident in their superiority, scrambled to evade the deadly new threat. One of the most significant moments of the raid came when a German fighter, locked in a deadly dogfight with a P-51, was caught in a high-speed maneuver. The Mustang's pilot, a young American named Captain Don Bryan, had been engaging multiple Luftwaffe fighters, and in a single swift turn, he sent one of the enemy planes crashing into the earth. The Mustang's deadly accuracy had shattered the myth of German invincibility, and the skies above Schweinfurt became a battleground where the Luftwaffe's superiority was no longer guaranteed. The raid was a tactical success for the Allies. The Schweinfurt factory suffered significant damage, and the Luftwaffe's bombers were decimated, with some reports estimating that over 50% of the attacking bombers were destroyed in the assault. But the true significance of the mission lay not in the bombings themselves, but in what it symbolized. The P-51 Mustang, once underestimated by the German High Command, had now proven its worth. The tide of the air war was shifting, but the Luftwaffe was not the only one to feel the consequences. For the American bombers, the Mustang's intervention had saved countless lives. The B-17 crews, who had previously faced the terror of German interceptors with limited protection, now had the support they needed to reach their targets with greater confidence. The long-range fighter escort had made strategic bombing missions possible in a way they had never been before. This was the beginning of the end for German air superiority. The Mustang had struck a fatal blow to the Luftwaffe's control over the skies. It was no longer just a machine. It was a symbol of American resilience, of technological ingenuity, and of the Allied will to win. The tide of war was turning, and the Mustang had taken flight as one of the key catalysts in that change. The impact of the P-51 Mustang's success in the skies over Germany was immediate and profound. By the end of 1943, the Luftwaffe's dominance in the air had been effectively shattered, and the balance of power in the European theater of World War II had tilted decisively in favor of the Allies. The Mustang's debut over Schweinfurt and its subsequent successes in the summer and fall of 1943 marked the beginning of a significant shift in air warfare. The skies were no longer dominated by the German Luftwaffe. Now, it was the Allies who were in control. The Mustang's effectiveness as an escort fighter meant that long-range strategic bombing missions could now be conducted with far fewer losses. Prior to the Mustang's introduction, the USAAF had suffered catastrophic losses during its daylight bombing campaigns over Germany. Without an escort capable of defending the bombers once they entered German airspace, B-17s and B-24s were easy targets for Luftwaffe interceptors. But with the P-51 Mustang, the bombers were no longer vulnerable. For the first time, the B-17s and B-24s could strike at the heart of the Nazi war machine without fear of being picked off. Before reaching their targets, the A-B, loss of German bombers and fighters in these engagements weakened the Luftwaffe's ability to defend its territory and crippled its efforts to disrupt Allied bombing raids. The Mustang's superiority in speed, range, and firepower made it a force that the Luftwaffe could not counter effectively. The German fighter force was already stretched thin, engaged in multiple theaters of war, and the arrival of the Mustang only added to their struggles. By the end of 1943, the Luftwaffe had lost thousands of aircraft, and its experienced pilots were either killed, captured, or reassigned to other fronts. In the wake of these defeats, the Luftwaffe's leadership was forced to confront the reality that their previous strategy was failing. The German High Command had underestimated the effectiveness of the P-51 Mustang and had paid a heavy price for their arrogance. Not only did the Mustang represent a tactical revolution, but its success also demoralized the Luftwaffe. The pride of Nazi Germany's air force was bruised, and the confidence it once held was shattered. The Mustang had become a symbol of the American resolve, a force that could not be easily defeated. For the United States and its allies, the Mustang was a game-changer. It allowed the Allies to intensify their strategic bombing campaigns, targeting critical German industrial centers, oil fields, and transportation networks. These raids, which were previously met with heavy resistance, could now be carried out with greater precision and less risk to the bomber crews. The damage to Germany's war production was immense. By 1944, the Allies were bombing key German cities, industrial sites, and military facilities with a newfound efficiency. The disruption of Nazi supply lines and the destruction of key infrastructure had a crippling effect on Germany's war effort. The P-51 Mustang's influence was not confined to the air. Its success also contributed to the overall shift in Allied strategy during World War II. The increased air superiority allowed the Allies to plan more daring operations. The D-Day landings in June 1944, for example, benefited immensely from the newfound control of the skies. The ability of Allied bombers to strike at enemy defenses, coupled with the protective escort of P-51 Mustangs, played a crucial role in the success of the invasion. As the war progressed, the P-51 continued to be a key player in the Allied victory. By the time of the Normandy landings and the subsequent liberation of France, the Mustang had solidified its place in history as one of the most effective fighters of World War II. It was involved in countless missions over Germany, France, and the Low Countries, providing air support for ground troops and conducting tactical strikes against enemy positions. Despite the Mustang's success, the Luftwaffe continued to fight back, attempting to reassert some form of air superiority with newer aircraft, like the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. However, by this point it was too late. The Allies had gained control of the skies, and the Luftwaffe was no longer capable of mounting a serious challenge. The war in the air would not end with the Mustang's victory, but its role in the downfall of the Luftwaffe was undeniable. The Mustang's sheer dominance in the skies helped to ensure that the Allies could sustain their bombing campaigns and maintain a strong presence in Europe. The Luftwaffe was effectively destroyed, and with it Germany's ability to wage an effective air war. The Mustang's impact extended far beyond its immediate effects on the war. The aircraft's success highlighted the importance of air power in modern warfare and forever changed the way future conflicts would be fought. The P-51 became a symbol of technological advancement, military ingenuity, and the resolve of the Allied forces. It represented the epitome of what could be achieved when nations united in the pursuit of a common goal. For the men who flew the Mustang, it was not just a fighter aircraft, it was a tool of liberation, a weapon that had helped turn the tide of history. The legacy of the P-51 Mustang is not just found in its victories or the battles it helped win. It lies in the profound impact it had on the course of history. The Mustang was more than an aircraft. It was a symbol of resilience, innovation, and the unyielding spirit of those who fought for freedom. Its success in the skies over Europe marked a turning point in World War II, one that would ultimately contribute to the defeat of Nazi Germany and the liberation of Europe. In the broader context of warfare, the Mustang represented a shift in the understanding of air power. Before its arrival, air superiority was often a byproduct of numbers, training, and sheer strength. But with the P-51, the Allies demonstrated that technology, precision, and strategic thinking could redefine the dynamics of a war. The Mustang was not just a faster or more powerful fighter. It was the product of meticulous design, international collaboration, and a deep understanding of the strategic needs of modern warfare. Its long-range capabilities allowed the Allies to conduct strategic bombing raids deep into enemy territory, a task that had previously been impossible. This change in tactics, the ability to strike at the heart of the enemy's war machine, with minimal losses, significantly weakened Germany's ability to wage war. The Mustang's success also highlighted the importance of leadership decisions in shaping the outcome of the war. The collaboration between American and British forces, the development of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, and the courage of the pilots who flew the aircraft all came together to create a force that would change the trajectory of history. In the years that followed, the lessons learned from the Mustang would inform the development of future generations of fighter aircraft. The legacy of the Mustang lived on in the technological innovations that it inspired, influencing the design of aircraft well into the Cold War. Perhaps most importantly, the P-51 Mustang embodied the human spirit in the face of adversity. The pilots who flew the Mustang were not just fighting a war against an enemy. They were fighting for their comrades, for their countries, and for the future of the world. The Mustang's machine guns may have ripped through the Luftwaffe bombers, but it was the courage, determination, and sacrifice of the men who flew it that ultimately made the difference. They understood the gravity of their mission, knowing that the skies above Europe would not be safe until the Nazi threat was eliminated. In the grand sweep of history, the Mustang is a reminder of how technological advancements, when combined with human will, can change the course of a war. It's a story of how a single aircraft, dismissed by some as just another tool of war, became a decisive force that altered the fate of nations. The P-51 Mustang did not just win battles. It won the air war, it saved countless lives, and it helped bring an end to the horrors of World War II. And in the years since, as we look back on the lessons of history, the Mustang remains a testament to the power of innovation, the bravery of those who fought, and the enduring hope that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can soar to unimaginable heights. This is the legacy of the P-51 Mustang, an aircraft that not only changed the skies over Europe, but also changed the course of history itself.